In what ways does your media product use, develop, and change forms and conventions of real media products? Usual conventions of a short film suggest that the characters have to be extreme, magnified versions of an ordinary character as to allow the audience to empathise instantaneously. They also suggest that the plot be short and snappy. Not a lot has to happen, but when it does, it must be effective and punchy, else the audience feels as if it's wasted its time. The audio effects and camera angles used do not conform to the conventions of a feature-length movie, as a short movie only has an average of 7 minutes to imprint on a viewer's mind, whilst a feature-length has roughly up to 3 hours to make an impression. Generally, all the conventions of a short film are to make the greatest impression because of the short time frame. The 3 main conventions elaborated. Number 1. Narrative. Characters are defined through their actions, not dialogue. Therefore, usually short films are filled with fast-paced drama rather than emotional backstories. They do not follow the feature-length convention of the weak become strong and the strong become weak, but follow an original path of their own in most cases. Number 2. Creativity. Most short films have an audience demographic not often fought after. The genre is most typically niche, because feature-length movies are traditionally where the money is made. Short movies do not have to follow the nuclear conventions and do not have the extortionate budgets of the movies such as The Avengers, which cost a whopping $220 million. This means that the producers and directors alike had to be creative to create the best, most professional movie. Number 3. Characters. In short movies, there is a rule of 3. No more than 3 main characters. To introduce more than 3 explained characters, you overload the viewer, leaving them disinterested and unengrossed. If all the main characters from The Usual Suspects were introduced in a film 7 minutes long, the audience wouldn't keep up and develop poor ideas of the movie. Refugee state concerning the conventions of a short movie. Refugee State utilises certain conventions of short films. I kept the main characters list down to only 3, with Luca Gambarini playing a brief role as a mugger of some sort, Gabriel Hines being the disinterested character who just happens to be caught up in it all, and myself being the nervous wreck who's supposed to be some torturing loon. Throughout the film, each character has little explanation for their role at all. This was done to fulfill the narrative conventions of short movies, not bombarding the audience with establishing information. I also allow for the baffling element of short films to take effect as each transition is made. Not everything is explained for the audience, so it appears baffling. This means the viewer has to piece together for themselves what is happening and how we arrived at this situation. This was done really effectively in the short movie This Way Up by Spike Morrison. Refugee State also follows Barth's Enigma Code, as the narrative teases the audience. The puzzle to be solved is how Gabriel's character will eventually return to his normal life. But in Barth's Enigma Code, the end of the movie has a pleasurable ending, whilst in Refugee State the ending contradicts conventions, as it has an inconclusive ending. It is so open-ended, the viewer is left asking so many questions. This stubs audience satisfaction, as people require answers, and in most cases dislike the unanswered questions. A professional example of this is the ending of the Life of Pi movie. This is an effective tool in media, as it leaves the audience craving a sequel. Radio advert conventions include a catchy jingle or song from the movie and a memorable quote or slogan. One of the most successful radio adverts of all time with a catchy slogan is the Compare the Market adverts. The language used in radio adverts will often be aimed at the audience demographic as to be engaging. Often they will contain feedback from the film from pre-release viewings and perhaps a vetted description of the narrative to entice the audience along with the date of release. And they'll contain all of this within an average of 30 seconds as not to bombard the listener and drag on for too long, making them bored. Refugee State concerning the conventions of a radio advert. Refugee State includes almost all of the usual conventions of a radio advert, with the title being read at the beginning and a male voice reciting an incomplete description of the movie. I include a date of release and reviews by pre-release viewers, but I veered from the usual conventions of including a slogan from the movie. I did this because there is very little dialogue in Refugee State, and not one piece stands above the rest, as memorable and striking. Refugee State Poster. The poster for Refugee State I especially designed to capture the visual adventure that the movie is. The normal convention suggests that the poster should encapsulate the general feel and genre of the movie with just one still image. I took inspiration from the poster of Trainspotting by Danny Boyle and summarised the relatively dark undertone of the movie whilst keeping the colourful outfits of the characters contrasting the humour with the darkness.